Thank you for joining us. I'm Katie with ISAC, and Nationwide Retirement Solutions will be presenting today on women and retirement, and I'll go ahead and pass it along to Matt with Nationwide.
Hey, thanks, Katie, and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on your afternoon here in the middle of the week. If you've not been a part of or had the opportunity to attend one of our prior webinars with the ISAC in the past, we're going to be presenting some information today with Roberta Eckert, who is a member of the Nationwide Retirement Institute. And the Institute is a division of Nationwide. The goal is to be able to provide thought leadership and information to be able to help our county members and participants just be a little bit more prepared for retirement when the day comes. I will go ahead and let Roberta take over from here, and then at the end of the presentation, I'll provide you with our contact information if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you for attending our afternoon webinar. This is actually the last day of spring, so tomorrow, first day of summer, longest day of the year. Sometimes it feels that way when you're working, that it's the longest day of the year. But today our topic is going to be women in retirement, as Matt and as Katie indicated. And what we discovered in the group that I work with is that when it comes to retirement, our journey as women is much more circuitous than men's. Men's have more of a linear journey than we do. It's a little more straight line, sometimes a little more predictable. But when it comes to women, we've got some different challenges that face us than the challenges that face men. And with that, we wanted to put together some information and a presentation centered around that specific demographic. I work for a group called the Nationwide Retirement Institute, and our group is out in the field every day, just about, working with different communities, different counties, states, municipalities, and so forth, all talking about thought leadership as it relates to retirement and preparing for retirement. So I hope that one day in the near future we'll get an opportunity to get face-to-face, but for now, we're going to start ahead and go with our webinar. One thing I think that's really interesting to note when it comes to Nationwide, and this is not intended to be a Nationwide commercial, but just to point out one or two things that we think are kind of interesting, especially when it comes to this topic, is that over 30% of our board of directors are made up of women. We're a very philanthropic company. We have pledged over almost $10 million to the United Way, as well as $50 million to the Nationwide Foundation Pediatric Innovation Fund at Children's Hospital. And then the thing that I think is really neat too when it comes to multicultural diversity is that we are ranked number 19 in Fortune's 2017 Best Workplace for Diversity. So it's nice to know that we're not only talking the talk, but we're walking the walk as a company. Today we're going to go over these several things. We're going to talk a little bit more about that journey I indicated when I first began. We will then move on to talking about Social Security considerations, specifically as they relate to women. That's one place I think where we can find some more money coming into the household, that many people aren't quite aware of how to maximize their benefits and how you can go about doing that. So we're going to take that on again from the perspective of the female standpoint, but we don't want to overlook another cost that is going to involve money going out the door, and that is healthcare and long-term care, and some considerations and thoughts around planning for that. And then last but not least, some next steps. So with that in mind, at the Nationwide Retirement Institute, we do a lot of presentations out personally. As I mentioned, we do a lot of presentations like this over the phone, but in a WebEx. But one thing also is that we also do a lot of surveys, we do a lot of polling, and we do a lot of outreach. And when we spoke to a large group of women, age 50 years old and older, about their approach to retirement, their thoughts about their retirement, what bubbled up quite a bit was that they're quite uncertain about this whole retirement thing. And it was one of the biggest hurdles that we found when it came to really having a successful retirement and being able to envision and carry out your vision when it comes to thinking about your retirement. And I got thinking about that and wondered, why the uncertainty? There's so much information out there. I like to think that there's a lot of information, but maybe not quite as much knowledge. And you could go just about anywhere and find out things about retirement. So why this uncertainty? And I think one of the answers lies in this photograph right here. Now, if I were standing in front of you, I would say to you, do you recognize this couple? And I would kind of be hopeful if you are hopeful for you to say, no, I do not. And you heard that right. You probably don't know who this couple is, but you know a couple like them. They might be your grandparents or your parents. This couple, incidentally, are my own parents. And when I was thinking about this uncertainty that stands in the way, I was thinking, why is that? Why is the group of cohorts that are now getting much more serious about retirement uncertain? And I realized that there has not really been a strong pathway or a large group of women who have forged a retirement in their own right. They basically followed along quite frequently what their husbands did. And so when you look at this picture, this is mom and dad in the mid 40s. And, you know, they followed a very traditional, very typical greatest generation pathway. My father fought in World War II, fortunately survived, came back, and they settled down, started a family, had 4 children. My mother was a Sunday school teacher. She was a homemaker, mother of 4. And my father went to work every single day, served on the school board, and really it was just about as white bread as you can get and Americana as you can get. But again, there was no clear pathway that was laid out for my mother. So given the fact that we don't have a real clear sight line, leads to some uncertainty when it comes to what we do next. However, things are changing for the group behind us. That's real good news, I think. And I just wanted to share some information with you about the fact that we are breaking down a lot of barriers, not only in the workforce as indicated here, but in politics and society. We've made fundamental changes in fashion and owning our own businesses. And you can see some information here about the percentage of higher education that we account for, our presence in the workplace, how much business or how many business owners we have. But still, the group that, as I mentioned earlier, is getting more serious about retirement are facing 3 hurdles. And what we're going to do is share those hurdles with you, and some of them are kind of linked together and result in some different challenges for us. So one of the hurdles is that gender wage gap, or the fact that women have over the course of their lifetime made less money than men. Now, incidentally, this is not necessarily primarily linked to the fact that companies may have paid women less than men for the same job, although there is some of that at play as well. A lot of this has to do with our choice to step out of the workforce or take a different career path in order to raise a family. And in fact, there was an article in the New York Times 2 years ago, just around now, that indicated that when a certain group of women that they were tracking, when they graduated from college, there was no wage gap between them and their male counterparts. And then it widened as they hit their 30s and widened still as they hit their 40s. And they could track that very closely to child rearing and childbearing and raising the family. And so I like to think that that's an investment of a different kind and a payoff of a different kind. But nevertheless, when it comes down to the hard and fast dollars, there is that gender wage gap or earnings differential. The second thing has to do with our role as the caregiver, and we'll look at that a little more closely shortly. But essentially, when you're looking at time spent out of the workforce, and this could be to care for aging parents, it could be to care for an aging spouse, but not necessarily limited to that. It could also be caring, again, for younger children. Women identify as caregiver, whether they're providing the actual hands-on care or even provide things like financial assistance to adult children. But nevertheless, if we spend a year out of the workforce, the aggregate cost is for a family about 3 times the individual's annual salary over a lifetime income stream. And then finally, there is a age gap, if you will, or a life expectancy coefficient. We outlive our male counterparts. And in fact, once you look at a group of individuals who are 85 years old or older, there are 2 women for every single male. In fact, sort of a funny story, my father-in-law is widowed. He's been widowed since 2011, and he is 92 years old, just turned in April. He is in fantastic shape mentally. He's in fantastic shape physically, and as a result, he never has to eat a dinner alone ever for the rest of his life because there are so many lonely female companions of his age group that would be delighted to share a meal with a nice, attractive 92-year-old. So you've got that age, you have that life expectancy issue as well. Now, with a longer life comes greater expenses, higher health care costs, and also a potential for a long-term care need. And as I said, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but I will start by thinking about this long-term care story. Long-term care for women really can take two different perspectives. One is of the caregiver. As women, we've been socialized to be a caregiver, and because often or historically we marry men a little older and we're going to outlive them anyway, we're in the position, and again, many people, myself included, feel that that's an honor to provide care to a family member, but at the same time, we're in the position of providing that care for, say, an aging spouse. The aging spouse then might transition through this care process, I guess, and move from informal care maybe to a more formalized setup. And at that point, the informal caregiving that the female spouse was providing ends, and they maybe into a more formal arrangement. But the other part of the whole long-term care situation is that because we tend again to outlive our husbands, if we care for the husband and then he passes away, then that safety net, if you will, of an informal caregiving in initial stages has been removed. So whereas we're providing informal care to our spouses, there might not be that same kind of informal care arrangement that we are able to take advantage of. And so we would need to really investigate the more formal approaches towards the impact of financial impact if we need care. With that, I'm going to turn my attention to a couple of thoughts around Social Security, and also share with you some of the results from the survey that we did regarding women's attitudes and approaches towards Social Security. Now, one thing is that when we went to a group of women in 2017, and they were 50 years old and older, and we said, okay, Social Security is something you want to be thinking about when you're retiring, so tell me how comfortable or confident you feel about your knowledge. And only 29% of the group we talked to said, yep, I feel either really confident or pretty confident. But that, of course, means that there are 71% that don't feel or have a strong level of confidence at all. And of course, that leads to uncertainty and makes it stressful. I would suggest that anytime you're uncertain about something, your stress level rises, whether you're uncertain about just about anything in your life, from the very mundane to the very serious. If you don't know things about the situation, your uncertainty and your anxiety can tend to increase. Once you're possessed with knowledge, even if it's not knowledge that you're happy with, at least you kind of know maybe what direction to go on. And so with that, we're going to talk a little bit more about Social Security. Just to give you a little level set, when you look at Social Security, Social Security is a government program, of course, that is going to provide you with an income stream that lasts for the rest of your life. Now, this past Monday in the newspaper USA Today, there was a statistic that said 52% of individuals 50 years old and older did not know or were not aware that Social Security was going to provide you with a monthly check that lasts as long as you do, lasts for the rest of your life. And in fact, it was interesting because that particular blurb in the newspaper was a direct quote and a pullout from the survey that we did. So we were quoted in the paper. We love it when that happens. That's kind of neat. But if you are looking at a lifetime income stream, one thing you might want to think about is matching that up with a lifetime, or pardon me, with essential expenses. So you might be thinking about things like food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, transportation. Those are really kind of the non-negotiables. You really have to have those kinds of expenses in order to carry on. Things like gifts, travel, etc., are more discretionary, and you can use other assets that you have that might be spinning off a more variable income stream or less predictable income stream that you could utilize for those expenses. So as you're looking at income to cover the basics, that would be very similar to your pension if you have one, income from an annuity, a CD, bond portfolio, but certainly Social Security. And in fact, about 43% of your income might come from that particular source. Now, when we looked at women versus men, what we realized is that for women age 50 years old and older, 62% of their income source, main income source in retirement, Social Security, compared to only 41% of men. And in fact, women expect Social Security to pay for 58% of all their expenses, which is a little high. It really was not intended to do that. It was intended to pay for less than 58% of your overall expenses. So I'm going to shift for a couple of minutes and dig into this a little bit more, again, from the perspective of what happens or what's the relevance for women specifically with Social Security. You may or may not know this. It's one of our basics that we talk about every time we do a specific Social Security presentation or a Social Security presentation that is purely directed towards that topic. But here's the baseline. If you have something called a full retirement age, and your full retirement age is indicated on your Social Security statement, it's also dependent upon the year you were born, but with your full retirement age, that's the age at which you can claim your full benefits. If you claim earlier, as this graph shows, you are going to receive a reduction in your benefits, and if you claim later, you will receive an 8% credit that is going to be added on every year up until you're 70. Now, you don't have to wait to claim till 70. You can claim any time from age 62 up to 70, really any time that you wish. But do know that if you have a full retirement age of 62, which is indicated here on the slide, and you want to claim your benefits, if your full retirement age is 66 years old, as indicated here on the slide, and you would like to claim at 62, that your own benefit will be reduced by about 25%. Now, just about everybody that we talk to every single day has a full retirement age that is either 66 years old or 67 years old, or some monthly combination in between. No one has a full retirement age of older than 67. But the takeaway on this is just know, if you claim before your full retirement age, you will receive a reduced benefit. And if you claim later, you will have a bigger benefit. So moving on, when we talk to women and say, well, when do you expect to claim? The majority, or on average, women expected to claim at about age 64.6 years old. Now, that means that they are claiming early because, remember, your full retirement age is 66, 67, or somewhere in between, and women are definitely claiming early. Now, if you waited a little bit longer, this expected monthly benefit on the right-hand side would be bigger. Right now, the average is about $1,212. Pardon me, but compared to men who claim a little later, but still not quite at full retirement age, and they're receiving a benefit of about $600 more. The only reason really in this differential, actually there are two. One is that men waited a little longer, and number two is because Social Security is based upon your earnings. Men, again, historically have a stronger earnings record, and so that would be another reason why their check would be a little higher. But moving on, what I want to do is share with you some thoughts around when to claim, based on your marital status or whether you're a single person, and look at what that could do regarding your income stream in retirement. So first off, when to file. We just looked at a chart a second ago that said if you file earlier, you're going to receive a reduction in benefits. If you can wait past your full retirement age, you're going to receive credits. And those credits, again, result in a monthly check that would be bigger, and that check lasts for the rest of your life. Also, there's some family members who might depend upon you, or you might depend on family members. So it always is a good idea to look at auxiliary benefits that you might be able to claim instead of your own benefit. And the first one we'll look at is what happens with married people. Now, I should point out one thing about single people. If you are single, and we discovered this, if you're single, it is possible that you might fall into one of two or several categories. One, you might be single because you had been married and now you're divorced. Or number two, you might be single because you are a surviving spouse, but again, had been married. And we'll look at those in just a moment. But if you are a single person, had never been married, then what you'd want to do is look at that chart that I showed you 2 slides ago, kind of identify when you might want to claim, take a look at that within the overall context of your other income sources, and then make the decision based on you. So this is one time it's all about you. This is not an asset or a program that you can leave to your niece, to your favorite charity, to your sister. This is something that if you don't take it, then you would lose it. So be sure that you look at that from the context of that chart. However, we do talk to a lot of married people. And what I want to share with you is the amount of Social Security check you might be eligible based on the work history of your spouse. So there are some rules. One rule says that you must be at least 62 years old to file for that benefit. You, by the way, would be impacted by a reduction in benefits if you claimed at 62, because again, you claimed before that magic age, which is full retirement age. Just about any time you claim any benefit before your full retirement age, you can be pretty assured that that is going to result in a reduced benefit. Okay, but you could do it. So I could claim at 62 if my spouse and I have been married for at least 1 year. And then finally, the third rule says that he actually has to claim his benefit in order for me to be eligible to claim a spousal benefit based on his earnings. Now, I'm always eligible for the benefit that I would be able to receive based on my own earnings. And if I have worked for 10 years or 40 quarters, those 10 years don't have to be consecutive, then I'm known as fully insured, and I would be eligible for a benefit based on my own work record. So again, if I've worked for 10 years or 40 quarters, then I would be eligible for my own benefit. But if that's, whether it's the case or not, I may also, in addition, be eligible for a spousal benefit. And what you'd want to do is compare the two benefits that you'd be eligible for and look at the one that's going to provide you with the highest degree of income. You can never take more than one check at a time. So in a situation like that, I would look at my own check, I would look at the spousal check, and then pick the one that's the bigger. Now, the amount of my spousal check is up to 50% of my spouse's primary insurance amount. And I want to go back to a slide that you saw a few moments ago to make sure I got this point across. Now, if you remember, your primary insurance amount is the amount that you would receive if you file at your full retirement age. Now, also, if my spouse does not claim his benefit, or until he claims his benefit, I am not eligible for a spousal benefit yet. I have to wait around until he claims. But I do want to make the point that once he does claim, even if he waits to age 67, 68, 69, or 70, the benefit I would receive as a spouse is still only half of his full retirement age number. I do not participate in those delayed retirement credits, or put another way, I don't get a piece of that 8% credit. I am still only going to get half of his primary insurance amount. So again, something that can throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into the plan, but it is often misunderstood because sometimes people in a married couple think, well, let's see, if the spouse waits to claim, then once he does, I'm going to get half of what he's getting. And that's not necessarily true, because if what he's getting includes those 8% credits, you don't get a piece of that. You're going to get half of the full retirement age amount only. So again, you'd look at that, look at your own benefit. If you were eligible for one, take the bigger one, and then move on. But you can never collect more than one check at a time. Okay, moving on. Unfortunately, some marriages end, or all marriages really end, I guess. Some end in a divorce, and some end when a spouse passes away. This is important to women, and the reason why is because, again, we tend to outlive our husbands, and so we tend to be the surviving spouse. And that is so much so, in fact, because that 95% of this surviving spousal benefit is paid to women. You will hear it sometimes informally referred to as a widow benefit, but don't take them literally. It could be paid to men or women, widowers or widows. But because, again, historically we outlive our husbands, we're the survivors, and we are the ones that very often receive this benefit. So here's what the rules say. The rules say that if my spouse predeceases me, I might be eligible for a survivor's check. So let's look at what I must do in order to qualify for that. First, we have to have been married for 9 months. Second, I could take the benefit this time a little earlier. They do allow me to take it earlier than age 62. But remember, if I do take it earlier, I would be subject to a reduction in that benefit. The third thing says that I will receive that widow's benefit as long as I am unmarried. And if I remarry after age 60, then that check that I would be receiving would continue. So even though I'm married to someone else, if I got married at age 60 or later, that surviving spouse's check is going to continue to be paid to me. Now, the amount that I get is different. In fact, it's bigger. This time, instead of getting half of my spouse's primary insurance amount, what they're going to do is look at the amount that he was receiving, even if he delayed, and that's the amount that I would get. So in other words, if my spouse delayed claiming, or even if he claimed at full retirement age, instead of getting half of the primary insurance amount, I will get the whole thing. I would also get that 8% a year amount if he had waited to claim. And every year, beginning at age 62 for everybody, there is a cost of living adjustment that's attached to your check, and I would receive that as well. So my check is much bigger as a survivor. And again, you would want to look at any other check you were receiving, whether it's your own or whether it's a spousal check, for example. Look at this one, and again, you can only get one check at a time, but it might make sense to collect this widow's check if it's the bigger one. So with that, I'm going to move on to another ruling, and this has to do with getting divorced. Whoops. So we're going to look at this for a moment because, again, there are a lot of statistics that revolve around women's income levels when they do get divorced. Very often in this cohort group, the income level or economic security doesn't go up. But I will tell you one or two things, and that is that since the 1990s, the divorce rate for the group 50 years old and older has more than doubled. So again, divorce rate more than doubled for the group 50 years old and older since the 90s. And in fact, there's a term for that. It's called gray divorce. Well, why is that? A couple of reasons. Number one, there's no longer the stigma attached to divorce that there used to be. Number two, women are a little more financially independent, maybe more than a little, than back in the day. And number three, I guess like any divorce, the husband and wife face each other over the breakfast table when the kids are out of the house and realize they're married to a stranger and don't want to continue in the marriage. But in any event, there are Social Security benefits for divorced individuals. How does that work? Well, first, if you were married for 10 years or longer and got divorced, then you might be eligible for a check based on your ex-spouse. And they might be eligible for a check based on you as well. You need to be currently unmarried. And if you recall in one of the benefits we talked about a little bit ago under the spousal benefits, that I needed to wait until my spouse filed, and then and only then would I be eligible for a spousal benefit. This time, if we're divorced, I do not have to wait for them to claim. Once we've been divorced for 2 years or longer, pardon me, I can go ahead and claim and don't have to wait for them. There's no impact on their check. There's no impact on their new spouse's check if they got remarried. And if they did, in fact, get married and got married and divorced and married and divorced, and we all, ex-wives, met all these criteria on the left, we all would get full benefits. There was no pool of money that we would be sharing. The amount that I would get is spousal benefits as if we were still married. And if you recall, that's half of the primary insurance amount. And then if and when my ex-spouse passes away, I would be eligible for that survivor benefit, which was the entire amount of Social Security that they were getting, plus any impact of the delays, and of course the cost of living adjustment. So absolutely makes sense to look at all of these possible benefits you might be eligible for and be sure that you're claiming the ones that you're entitled to. The Social Security people do not have a list of all the ex-spouses, so it might make sense for you to sit down with them and look at or tell them about any prior marriages you have. See if your ex-spouse has passed away, because it might be that there's a benefit there waiting for you. Okay, going forward, I did want to let you know, and we can provide this to you in a PDF, that we actually can create a assessment or a report for you specifically. There's a PDF of a questionnaire I'm going to share with you in 2 seconds, but what this report will do is take all of these crazy Social Security rules, sort through them, and help you by identifying 4 claiming strategies that are customized to you and your situation, whether you're married, a surviving spouse, widowed, single, whatever it is. They're going to lay 4 choices out there for you. And in fact, there's a little more detail behind each choice, but if you have an interest in getting this report, there is actually an income spreadsheet or an income income and expenditure cash flow sheet on this report, and then we can provide that to you. And again, Matt's going to post this as a PDF because there is actually a questionnaire that you would fill out. That questionnaire is confidential. We do not ask for your Social Security number. You get the report sent to any inbox or any email address you prefer, and there's no cost for it. It's something that we provide all of the counties, municipalities, and so forth that we have relationships with. So take advantage of that. As I said, it's confidential and it costs you nothing. So you might as well kind of sort through all this or have someone else do it and provide you with some sightlines about your own claiming. Moving on, I want to talk for a few moments also about healthcare costs. We've talked about some ways in which you might be able to tweak some income coming in the door, but we don't want to overlook money going out the door. And as you're looking at what your health care is going to cost, be aware it's going to be one of your larger expenses in retirement. Most of it is paid for by Medicare. You can see that 64% of your health care is paid for by Medicare. Some of it is picked up by private insurance. This might be a Medigap plan or a Medicare supplement plan, and some of it's going to come from your own pocket. So also, I'm flipping back one, some of it also might come from your prior employer. Some employers, in fact, do provide some kind of subsidy for health care when people retire, although that's becoming less and less frequent. Our group that we talked to said we're really concerned about health care costs going out of control, and really we should be, because the rate of inflation for health care is more than 2 times what you'll receive as a cost of living adjustment in your Social Security check. So what we did was actually go shopping to buy a Medicare plan for an individual living in our home office city of Columbus, Ohio. And really what I wanted to point out was when this individual is 65 years old and on Medicare, and if you are looking at the Part A, which is hospitalization coverage, Part B, which is medical coverage, Part D, a prescription drug plan, and a Medigap plan, just the premiums alone could run this individual about $4,000. Part A and B are standardized. So you would pay, if you have worked for, again, this 10-year or 40-quarter number, magic numbers coming up as it did with Social Security. But if you're looking at Part A and you've worked for 40 quarters or 10 years, then you would not pay a premium. You have been paying it. It's already been taken care of, but you might also be subject to some other out-of-pocket costs like deductibles and copays. Part B, so that's standardized across the country. That's hospitalization. Part B is medical coverage, and that's standardized as well. Part D and G are provided by private insurance companies in your respective marketplaces. We are not in this market. Nationwide does not sell prescription drug or Medigap or Medicare Advantage policies, but we do want to provide this information to you, of course, and that premium right now is about $4,000 for this particular individual in the Ohio market. Now in Iowa, might be a little different. You could be paying less for Part D and Part G, but we can provide some information for you that way as well. I also want to touch on long-term care. And I mentioned when we got started that we really have two factors when it comes to long-term care, as the person being cared for and also as the person providing care. Just to level set, long-term care is a range of services and support that you might need if you meet a couple of criteria. And the criteria say, if you cannot, in the opinion of your personal physician, if you cannot conduct 2 or more activities of daily living, then you would be eligible for long-term care assistance. And that assistance could be through different governmental programs, or they could be through a long-term care insurance policy. Full disclosure, Nationwide does sell long-term care policies, but what it covers are these activities of daily living. And what I want to share with you is, what are these activities of daily living? And it's basically, think of everything you do when you open up your eyes in the morning, when you wake up, to getting yourself out the door. So you dress yourself, you bathe, you eat, you use the bathroom, you actually get out of bed. That's called transferring. And there's 6 of them that have been identified. And again, if your personal physician indicates that you can't perform 2 or more of those, then you could go on and file a claim on your policy if you have one. Now, many people think that Medicare will provide that kind of coverage to you. It does not. It will provide limited care only if you are on a progression to become better. Long-term care is typically chronic and long-lasting. Therefore, Medicare would not cover it, and the majority of costs would fall out of your own pocket. Now, when it comes to the caregivers, more than 75% of individuals providing care, whether it's paying bills, whether it's actual hands-on, whether it's financial support, but more than 75% of unpaid caregivers are women, spouses, daughters, daughters-in-law, and so forth. I mentioned when we started 1 in 3 women have a spouse over 75 years old to care. 1 in 3 women over 75 years old actually has a spouse to provide that informal care, should she be the one that needs that kind of care. So without a spouse, I used the term safety net earlier. That safety net's removed, and then you need to be looking maybe at more formal ways of receiving some kind of care, whether someone coming into the home or providing meals or what have you. 67% of affluent women don't know what that cost could be, but I can tell you that it can be something that could seriously deteriorate all the savings that you have saved for retirement. I do not intend for this to be long-term scare, but it is something that if you have provided care for a family member or seen the economic impact on a coworker, their family, neighbor, friend, relative, and so forth, you know that it can be very expensive and almost devastating. So when it comes to solutions, how can you pay for that? Well, some guaranteed income sources might. I talked a little about long-term care insurance. That is something you might have interest in looking into. But either way, there might be a gap between health care, long-term care added up together in the aggregate, and what you actually have estimated for that level of care. So in fact, when we did some more research, both on men and women, we discovered that 80% of people don't know what their health care costs would be in retirement. And as I said a little earlier when we started on this particular subject, the 80% of people have no idea what it's going to cost them. And when we started, I was indicating that it could be one of the biggest expenses that you will face during your retirement. So we also have the capability to provide you with a report on your healthcare costs, and that, taken side by side with your Social Security report, could give you a lot of information, provide you with a better track. We're going to ask you about 15 questions. They are simply yes/no questions. No additional information is required. And given these 15 questions, the actuarial group that we have contracted with is able to dial in pretty closely to what your personalized healthcare costs would likely be. This is based on where you're going to retire. I think it makes sense that no matter where you retire, whether you retire in some parts of the country or other parts of the country, that healthcare costs could be more or less expensive depending upon where you're retiring. Your age plays a factor. Some health triggers play a factor. All of those things go into this. And so, again, we're able to provide you with a customized report. Again, it can be sent to any email address you designate. There's no cost for it. It is personalized and it is private. So it lays out a bunch of numbers about what you might be looking at spending. There's also a component that also goes through that process of long-term care, going from home health care to assisted living to maybe a nursing home. If you have questions, we will also post this telephone number for these two reports at our retirement resource group, and we'll make sure that we have those resources available to you, both of the questionnaires as well as the telephone number. So for my last segment, it's going to take maybe about 5 or 6 minutes. Where do we go from here? So lots of information out there, and what I tried to do was cut through a few of the most compelling. Social Security and healthcare, and a lot of the Social Security and healthcare questions have to do, again, with those three challenges that we all face. The role of the caregiver, or looking at any kind of caregiving, the fact that we have a longer life expectancy, and the fact that historically women have made less than men. So when you take all of that together, again, those are some different challenges than what men face. And as a result, because we tend to step in and out of the workforce also, our retirement journey is a little bit more circuitous than men's. So I'm going to pull back a little bit and just give you some things to think about. When you're looking at income sources, there are a lot of them. Social Security, of course, we just talked about, your own planning, retirement accounts, a 401k, a 457, IRA, Roth. If you have a pension, if you have rent coming in, annuities, insurance, inheritance. One thing I found very compelling is that as women, because we have, again, a longer life expectancy, we are the ones that are going to be running our family's wealth if our husbands predecease us. We're going to inherit from our parents. However, women are looking nowadays at building wealth in our own way, and also through inheritance. By the year 2023, there's going to be $72 trillion globally that we women are going to be either the decision makers or influences over. So when I saw inheritance, I wanted to step out and think about that. It could be you're going back to work part-time and something you really love to do. And the costs outside of those essential costs or expenses that you want to really identify. Your food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, transportation. What about other things? What about if you're providing any kind of financial assistance or care for children or grandchildren? What about travel, entertainment, all of those more discretionary expenses? If you haven't already, be thinking about what your budget looks like. There are some companies that will say you only need 75% of your current income to live off of in retirement in today's dollars. We torque that up a little bit because we understand the impact of healthcare costs. And so we're saying probably more like 80%. But be thinking about what your budget looks like. You might not have to commute. Your mortgage might go away, but at the same time, your taxes probably won't go down on the real estate level, and you might have more maintenance as well. So what are your next steps? Well, hopefully I've given you some food for thought here that you can take away and be thinking more closely about. Review your Social Security options. There might be some money there that you might potentially be eligible for that you hadn't considered, but don't overlook the healthcare and long-term care costs that you would be facing as well. At the Nationwide Retirement Institute, we are very interested in providing you with as much information and breaking down and simplifying a lot of these complex issues so that you can really put those different pieces of the puzzle into place along with all the rest of your different retirement aspects, your 457 plan and so forth, and really make sure that your retirement has been mapped out very carefully. So I am done with the slide part of the presentation. I hope that you found this interesting. In the future, we can come and deliver presentations centered around Social Security for the entire hour, healthcare costs for the entire hour, We go a little bit more into Medicare Part A and B and so forth in that presentation. Maybe if you'd like to know more about long-term care. So we've got several presentations that we would be delighted to come out and talk to you all about. But for now, I am going to turn the program over to Matt Ring and to Katie, and they can see if there were any questions, and also to close us out if not.
Hey, thanks, Roberta. Thank you for your time and all the information you provided today. If anybody has any questions after today's call, you can reach me directly on my cell phone. It's area code 515-218-0303, or my email, which is ringm3@nationwide.com. The information discussed today and some of the resources available are at your fingertips, either online or through calling or emailing me. You do not need to be a Nationwide member or participant. So if your county does not currently offer a nationwide deferred compensation plan, these materials are still available to you through our partnership with ISAC and the National Association of Counties. And I'll also say that, and Katie might touch on this too, is after today, you can review the webinar at the iowacounties.org website or on the ISAC YouTube page. And we've done several through the years, as Roberta touched on. A couple of years ago, we did a Medicare presentation and Social Security presentation. So it's all available for you, or if you'd like to maybe talk about or plan having an event at your particular county as well. I'll leave it at that. If Katie has any final words, thank you again, everybody, for joining our call today. We know you're really busy, so we appreciate you taking time out of the afternoon, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Matt and Roberta. I don't show any questions right now, but as Matt said, you can always visit the ISAC page, the website and YouTube page to visit any prior webinars. If you have any questions on that, feel free to contact me by calling ISAC. Other than that, we'll go ahead and end the webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.